My sister got pregnant by my boyfriend, and he disappeared. My parents blamed me and sent me an email titled, "Baby expenses, over $20,000. I just laughed in their face and said, "I'm Laura. I'm 28 years old, and I've always worked hard to get ahead. Since graduating college, I landed a good job in digital marketing. I'm not swimming in money, but I earn enough to pay for my apartment, treat myself occasionally, and live without depending on anyone. I'm proud of being independent. But if there's one thing I regret, it's staying with Diego, my ex-boyfriend, more out of pity than love. That was my big mistake. I met Diego 3 years ago at a cafe. He was all smiles, sweet words, and an attitude like he owned the world. But soon I saw the reality. Diego had no job and no clear plans. He'd say he was looking for something at his level, but there was always an excuse. The pay was too low, the position wasn't right, or it wasn't the right time. I thought he just needed a push, that I could help him. I felt sorry for how lost he seemed, so I stayed with him. How foolish I was. I wasn't with Diego for what he could offer me, because he offered nothing. I paid for everything, dates, bills, even the clothes he wore to job interviews. I stayed because I thought he'd fall apart without me, that I could fix him, that with time he'd find his way. Sometimes he made me laugh or listen to me, and that made me think it was worth it. But deep down, I knew it wasn't enough. My mistake was letting pity keep me by his side. My parents saw Diego as a jackpot. From the moment I introduced him at home, they thought he came from a wealthy family. I don't know why, maybe because he spoke confidently or wore decent clothes that I bought. My mom was obsessed. "Laura, don't let that man go," she'd say. "He's a catch." And by catch, they meant one thing: a son, a baby to secure everything. "A baby?" my dad said once during dinner. I laughed. "With what, Dad?" But they insisted it didn't matter. His family must have money. I looked at them like they were crazy. A child with someone who contributed nothing? Never. I knew Diego was what they thought, and I refused to buy into their idea. My younger sister, Carla, 24, was another problem. Whenever Diego came to the house, she flirted shamelessly. She laughed at his dumb jokes, touched his arm, batted her eyes. I saw it, but didn't think much of it. It's just Carla, I thought. Diego told me not to pay attention, that she was just trying to annoy me, and I believe him. I thought her interest stemmed from the same delusion as my parents, that Diego had money. How wrong I was. I stayed with Diego not for love or a future together, but out of pity. I thought it was my responsibility to help him. What a huge mistake. A month ago, everything changed. My company sent me on a business trip to another city for a week of important meetings. I told my parents and Diego I'd be gone for 7 days. Diego didn't object. "Relax, love. Focus on your work," he said with that smile that no longer convinced me. My parents didn't make a fuss either. "Make the most of it, Laura," my mom said. So I packed my suitcase, boarded a plane, and left. The trip was a success. We closed a big deal, and everything wrapped up 3 days early. I decided to return without telling anyone, thinking it'd be a surprise. "I'll get home and rest," I told myself as the plane landed. I was exhausted but happy. I arrived in the city at night, took a taxi to my parents' house where Diego was staying. He said he didn't like being alone in my apartment. "I'd rather stay with your parents," he'd told me. I didn't think much of it. When I got there, the house was silent, which struck me as odd. My parents are always in the living room watching TV or talking. I parked, grabbed my suitcase, and opened the door with my key. "Mom, Dad, I'm back." I shouted. Nothing. The living room was empty, the lights off. I thought they'd gone out. I left my suitcase and went upstairs calling, "Mom, Dad, where are you?" The second floor was just as quiet. My parents' bedroom door was closed, and I heard nothing. I assumed they were asleep. Then I approached Carla's room. The door was slightly ajar. "Carla, are you there?" I said, pushing it open. What I saw froze me. Carla was in her bed, disheveled, naked, covered only by a sheet. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Laura, what are you doing here?" She stammered nervously, clutching the sheet tightly. Something was wrong. My stomach knotted. What's going on, Carla? I asked, stepping closer. She tried to speak, but only stuttered. Then I noticed someone else under the sheet. My heart raced. Without thinking, I yanked the sheet away. There was Diego, my boyfriend, in my sister's bed, shirtless, hair messy, staring at me in panic. For a second, I couldn't move. I could only see them together, as if I didn't exist. What is this? I screamed, my voice trembling. Diego tried to stand, saying, Laura, it's not what you think, but I didn't let him speak. Don't tell me that. I saw you. You're with my sister? I yelled, pointing at Carla, who stayed silent, staring at the floor. Finally, Carla spoke. Laura, I'm sorry, she started, but I cut her off. Shut up. I don't want to hear you. I shouted. My head was a mess. Everything I'd endured for Diego, out of pity, was crumbling. How stupid I was, I said, looking at Diego. Out. Now, I said, pointing to the door. He tried to grab his clothes, but I couldn't stand to look at him. I said, get out. Diego grabbed his things half-dressed and ran downstairs. I looked at Carla. She was trembling, still clutching the sheet. I wanted to scream, to ask why she betrayed me, but I couldn't. I just felt empty. Without a word, I left the room, closed the door, went downstairs, grabbed my suitcase, and left the house. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there, not after what I'd seen. When I left my parents' house, suitcase in hand and heart shattered, I didn't know where to go. I just wanted to get away from that place, from Carla, from what I'd seen. I drove to my apartment on autopilot, as if my body knew the way while my mind was elsewhere. When I got there, I left the suitcase at the door, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall. That's when it all hit me. Why did I stay with Diego so long? It wasn't love or hope for a future together. It was pity. Pity for a man who had nothing to offer, who lived off my efforts while I fooled myself into thinking I could help him. I felt so stupid. I gave 3 years of my life to someone who wasn't worth it, who never tried to be better, who betrayed me with my own sister. I regretted every moment I gave him, every chance I offered. That was my mistake, and now I was paying for it dearly. An hour later, my phone started buzzing. Messages from Diego. I read them with a mix of anger and disgust. Laura, please forgive me. I don't know what happened. It was a mistake. I swear it means nothing. Then another, I got a job. I'm really changing. Give me another chance. More empty promises, the same ones I'd heard 1,000 times. A job? Sure. He always said that when he wanted to get his way. I just thought what a loser he was. A man who couldn't support himself, who slept with my sister, and now wanted to crawl back into my life. I didn't respond. I blocked his number and tossed the phone on the couch. I wasn't falling for it again. The next 2 weeks were total silence. I didn't talk to my parents or Carla. I didn't want to know anything about them. I focused on my work, my meetings, my projects. It was the only thing keeping me sane. My apartment became my refuge, the only place I could breathe without feeling the weight of betrayal. But I knew I couldn't avoid my family forever. Sooner or later, I'd have to face them. One day, I got a message from my mom. Laura, we need to talk. It's important. Come to the house tomorrow at 6. I didn't want to go, but something told me I couldn't keep ignoring them. Maybe it was time to clear things up. So the next day, after work, I drove to my parents' house. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. My parents were seated at the dining table with serious faces. Carla was there, eyes red, crying silently. They asked me to sit. What's going on? I asked, crossing my arms. I wasn't in the mood for drama. My dad looked at me with fury. Why didn't you tell us the truth, Laura? He said, his voice sharp. I was confused. The truth? About what? My mom, upset, chimed in. That Diego was a failure. Why didn't you tell us? I frowned. What's the problem with that? You always knew he didn't have a job. I told you 1,000 times. My dad slammed the table. You didn't tell us he was a good-for-nothing. And now, because of you, we're in this mess. I was lost. What are you talking about? I asked, raising my voice. My mom, with tears in her eyes, dropped the bombshell. Diego got Carla pregnant, and when he found out, he ran. We don't know anything about him. For a second, I was speechless. I felt a mix of disbelief and rage. I looked at Carla, who kept crying without looking at me. Pregnant by Diego? I said, my voice trembling. This is ridiculous. How is it my fault that Carla slept with my boyfriend behind my back? I turned to Carla. You knew he was my partner. How could you do this? The responsibility is yours. She sobbed harder but said nothing. My dad defended her. Don't talk to your sister like that. She's going through something difficult. Then he said something that left me stunned. We encouraged her to get close to Diego. We thought he came from a millionaire family. Since you didn't want to secure your future by having a child with him, we wanted to secure Carla's. But you never told us he had nothing. This is your fault. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My fault? You're saying you told Carla to sleep with my boyfriend because you thought he was rich, and now you blame me because I didn't warn you he was a loser. The rage burned inside me. I stood up from the table, looking at them with a mix of mockery and contempt. This is your problem. You got her into this. Now fix it. Without waiting for a response, I grabbed my purse and left the house. I couldn't believe my family's audacity. They'd pushed Carla to betray me, all for a fantasy of wealth that never existed, and now they wanted to make me responsible. It was absurd. For the next 2 months, I cut them off completely. I didn't talk to my parents or Carla, and I heard nothing about Diego. I focused on my life, my work, my friends, my peace. I was starting to heal, to move past the pain of betrayal. But, as always, my family had to barge back in. One day, I got an email from my dad. The subject read, "Baby expenses." I opened it, think it was a joke, but it wasn't. It was a detailed list of projected expenses for Carla's delivery and the baby's first month. Doctor visits, clothes, a crib, everything. At the bottom, the total, $5,000. And at the end of the email, a line that made my blood boil. Remember, this is your responsibility. After all, he was your boyfriend. I laughed alone in my apartment. My responsibility? After everything they'd done, this was a final straw. I ignored the email and went on with my life. I wasn't falling for their game. A week later, there was a knock at my apartment door. It was my parents. I didn't invite them in. I stood at the doorway with my arms crossed. "Laura, you have to send that money for Carla," my mom said in a demanding tone. My dad nodded. "It's your obligation. The baby isn't to blame." I scoffed in their faces. "My obligation? You're insane. Carla slept with Diego. You push her to do it, and now you want me to pay for her mistake?" I shook my head, laughing. "Don't be so shameless. Help your daughter. You got her into this. Now get her out." My parents glared at me with fury. My mom tried to say something, but I cut her off. "I'm not discussing this. This isn't my problem." I closed the door and left them there, fuming as they walked away. After shutting the door in my parents' faces, I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief because I'd freed myself from their audacity, from their attempts to blame me for the disaster they created. Anger because I couldn't believe they had the nerve to demand money for Carla's baby after they'd pushed her to betray me with Diego. I sat in my apartment, looking out the window, trying to leave all that drama behind. I thought I could finally move on with my life, but fate had other plans. A week later, my phone rang. It was Carla. I hesitated to answer. I hadn't spoken to her since that night at my parents' house, when I found her with Diego. But something in me, maybe curiosity or a lingering bit of affection, made me pick up. Her voice was shaky, desperate. "Laura, please help me," she said between sobs. "What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my tone cold. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. "Mom and Dad don't want to support the baby," she said, her voice breaking. "They say they don't have enough money, that they can't handle this. I'm alone, Laura. I don't know what to do." I felt a knot in my stomach, but the anger was stronger. "Carla, you brought this on yourself," I said without softening my words. "You slept with Diego behind my back." Now you have to face the consequences." She sobbed harder, begging, "Please, Laura, don't leave me like this." I sighed, exhausted. "Don't worry, they'll find some solution. But this isn't my problem." I hung up before she could say more. That was the last time I spoke to her. I didn't want to fall back into my family's drama. I told myself Carla had to figure out her life, that it wasn't my responsibility to carry her mistakes. I focused on my work, my friends, rebuilding my routine. But deep down, her words kept swirling in my head. I couldn't help feeling a pang of guilt, even though I told myself it wasn't my fault. 2 months later, my phone rang again. It was my mom. I answered, expecting another of her absurd demands. But what I heard left me frozen. She was crying, almost screaming. "It's all your fault, Laura. Why didn't you help your sister?" My dad, in the background, was also crying, repeating the same thing. My heart raced. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. My dad, through tears, said words I'll never forget. "Carla's dead. Because of you. She tried to terminate the pregnancy and didn't make it." I was frozen. The phone nearly slipped from my hands. "Dead," I murmured, unable to process it. I remembered Carla's voice, begging for help, saying she was alone. Her words echoed in my mind like a cruel refrain. I hung up without saying anything else. I sat on the floor, staring blankly, feeling an unexplainable void. How had this happened? How had everything gone so far? The next few days were a fog. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The image of Carla, her desperate voice, haunted me. I wondered if maybe I could have done something, if listening to her, offering a hand, would have changed things. But then I remembered her betrayal, how she slept with Diego, and the anger returned. I was trapped between guilt and rage, not knowing how to move forward. 3 days later, there was a knock at my apartment door. It was 2 police officers. "Miss Laura, we need to ask you some questions," one said in a serious tone. I sat with them in the living room, confused. They asked if I'd had contact with Carla in the last few days, if I knew anything about her situation. Then they asked about Carla's relationship with my parents. I had nothing to hide, so I told them everything. I told them about Carla's betrayal with Diego, how my parents had encouraged her to do it thinking he was rich. I told them about Carla's call, begging for help because my parents wouldn't support the baby. I showed them the messages she'd sent, pleading with me not to leave her alone. The officers took notes, thanked me, and left. They didn't explain much, but their visit left me with a bad feeling. I didn't talk to my parents again. I didn't want to face them or hear their accusations. Carla's death was already too heavy, and being near them would only make it worse. But 3 days later, I got a call that changed everything. It was my mom from a police station. "Laura, please come. We need your help," she said, her voice broken. I didn't want to go, but something told me I had to know what was happening. I drove to the station, my stomach in knots. When I arrived, I saw my parents handcuffed, sitting in an interrogation room. Their faces were swollen from crying. An officer approached and explained the situation. After Carla's autopsy and a search of my parents' house, they found evidence of something horrific. My parents, using chloroform, had sedated Carla while she slept and took her to an illegal doctor to terminate her pregnancy. The procedure went wrong, and Carla died from complications. The doctor was arrested, but my parents were the main culprits. I was in shock. My legs trembled, and I felt the air escape me. "What did you do?" I murmured, looking at my parents. They didn't look at me, just lowered their heads. The rage exploded inside me. "You're murderers." I screamed, tears streaming down my face. "Carla asked you for help, and you killed her." I couldn't stand being there. I ran out of the station, ignoring my mom's shouts begging me to come back. I got to my apartment and collapsed. I cried like never before, clutching my phone, looking at Carla's messages. "Please help me," one said. "I don't know what to do," said another. Each word was a knife in my chest. She'd asked for help, put her last hopes in me, and I'd left her alone. It didn't matter that she betrayed me, that she'd broken my trust. She was my sister, and now she was dead. I felt trapped in a whirlwind of guilt, pain, and regret. 2 weeks later, I learned through the news that my parents had been sentenced. 40 years in prison each. The illegal doctor got 20 years. Justice had been served, but I didn't feel better. Nothing could bring Carla back. Nothing could erase the void her death left in my life. I moved forward, or at least tried to. I went back to work, hung out with friends, tried to keep my routine. But nothing was the same. Every day, waking up, I felt the weight of not having helped my sister when I could. Her messages, her voice, her desperation haunted me. And though I knew I wasn't the only one to blame, that my parents had made the most horrific decision, I couldn't help feeling that maybe a small action from me could have changed everything.